Hey everybody, welcome to Admissions 2024 Secrets to Beat the Odds and Get In. My name is Justin. You are in the right place if you are working on your college admissions and you are a rising senior or soon to be, or a parent or even a counselor. Um, we're here to talk about what happened in 2023 that we can learn together to really up our chances of getting into our top schools. And if you have any questions at all, we can get to those. I will explain how to do that in a minute. If you don't know where I am on the screen, I'm in this top right corner, floating there. And like I said, if you do have any comments or questions, go ahead and put those into the chat or the Q&A down below. All right, so why don't we go ahead and get into the content for today. So again, my name is Justin. I want to introduce myself. I'll just make my face a little bigger so you can see me. Hey guys. So I am a professional admissions coach. I love helping students discover their wow, as I like to say, the story that can really compel admissions officers to stand up and take notice, but also the passion or the wow that gets you out of bed at 4 a.m. in life or stay up till 4 a.m. These are the things that I find really help students break through and and also help life be amazing. So all good stuff. So let's talk a bit about that together as we move through the content today. So our agenda, first we're going to talk about what happened last year, which was kind of bananas. If you had any friends in school or siblings and noticed their admission results were really nonsense to you or didn't quite make sense or seemed really, really hard compared to other years, you saw a lot of what was happening. It wasn't just you or your friend. This was a trend across the board. However, um, the students that I worked with this past year, almost all of them got into their top choice school, if not their next choice school. So I want to talk to us all about what they did differently, and what you can do differently in 2024, because there are some things, some trends that are changing. One of those is about the majors that are competitive in the current landscape at top schools. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about who admissions officers are and how they think right now. There are some changes to other years also that are coming up. We'll be covering all of that. Of course, we'll talk about discovering your wow, the big thing behind my approach to admissions and my process. I'm going to share all of that with you. People often spend a good amount of money to do that work one-on-one with me. I'm going to give it to you straight here so you can see what it's all about and maybe even do it on your own. We're also going to look at some real stories from real students like you who broke through, what they did, and what you can do to do the same, as well as your questions. All right. So, a few things that happened in the landscape in 2023. As you all know, COVID had a big impact on college admissions. Um, what did it do? It dissuaded some students from applying. That's the first thing. So there was a slight decrease of applicants over the past 4 years. However, the top schools saw a surge in the number of applications that they were receiving. So I would say the top 50 schools in the US. Um, this has all brought admission rates very, very low for many schools. It used to just be like the Ivies plus U Chicago and Stanford and MIT and Duke and schools like this had admission rates below 10%. And now there's about 50 schools that have that. Schools that normally we would call second tier or mid-tier schools are now more like these elite schools, a school like a BU or a Tulane or a UCLA or a U Michigan. All of these schools have seen their admission rates drop below 10%. Not U Michigan, but close. However, there are schools that have seen a drop in applications, like state schools, which are actually an exceptional choice when it comes to cost benefit. We're going to talk about that. cost benefit analysis. For those of you who are business majors, you know what I mean, or soon to be business majors. Um, the other thing that we saw last year, which is very quick to say, is that early decision became the preferred portal for admissions at top schools. They really want to be able to lock in and control who is their freshman class as early as possible. And with the increased demand at these places, they feel like they have less of a need to work with students who have financial need. And so they lessened the window for financial, I'm sorry, for regular decision. They lessened the admission rate for regular decision. And this has had a big impact. I now encourage all my students to have an early decision choice that is in their ballpark, not like pie in the sky reach, because they won't get in, but schools that really do fit your profile, that where you would be happy. An early decision choice or an early decision application is a really smart choice if it's a school you really want. Um, if not, plenty of students are getting in on regular decision, or this thing called early decision 2. Early decision, if you don't know what that means, it's just you apply November 1 or 15 for private schools, and you get your decision in February. I'm sorry, in December. You get your decision in December, and it's binding. You can't financially um, bargain. You have to accept what they gave you for financial aid. So it's a big decision, and not for every family, but it is the number one way schools are admitting students now. Um, Between 30 and 60%, some schools 70% of their classes is being decided early decision, and in this top tier schools. So um, when you are looking at those kinds of schools, early decision is the way to go. It really helps. One thing also to consider about 2024 is the um, schools that are outside of big cities. So the schools that are in the big cities are the most popular. So that would be UCLA, UC Berkeley, NYU, Tulane in New Orleans, and the schools in Boston. So if you are willing to look in emerging cities like a Seattle or an Austin or a Denver, uh, you or even Philadelphia, you will find there's less competition. So that's one thing to think about if you really want to be near a city, which most applicants do now. And that might help you get a leg up. So, um, what can you do to make your admissions experience less stressful and your acceptance rates a little more favorable? The most important thing you can do is to balance your list. A lot of students make their reach schools the focus. And I really recommend that those kinds of schools occupy no more than 20% of your list. Even though they're the brands and all that have all the shiny things that you think you like, there are many schools that have all those shiny things you think you like. They really, really, really are. Schools know what's up. Um, so look at the mid-tier, look at the schools in those emerging cities, look at the schools that are not as big a brand name for you and your classmates, but are um, just as rich with amenities and academics. So those should occupy the main part of your list, the middle section, and then the bottom safety side of the likelies, state schools and public schools tend to have uh, more favorable admission rates, or schools where they practice direct admission based on GPA. So like in Texas, if you're in the top 10% of your high school, you're automatically admitted to the UT. And that is true in some of the Big Ten schools like Indiana University, Cincinnati University, you can be admitted based on your GPA. So those would be good for your likelies. The other thing to do is to look at schools beyond just uh, the immediate priorities that you have, but look at the size that matters, the regions that matter, academic focus. Alumni network is something people don't talk about a lot, but it's really where um, the cost benefit analysis comes in, because the alumni network tends to be how graduates get work, get their jobs. And that is one of the main reasons people go to university, right? So take a look at the alumni network of schools. There might be some surprises out there that you haven't considered. Um, there are schools that have a very loyal alumni network. U Michigan's a very famous one. USC. I mean, these are more selective schools that I just named, but when you dig a little deeper, you can find that the alumni network might be a big factor. The other one is cost. And I want to share with you an app that I think is really handy at expanding a student's list, balancing the list based on some of these priorities we named. This is the New York Times Build Your Own College Ranking app. So if you just search this term in Google, you'll find there's this free application. This is a screen share, a screen grab from the application itself, where you can um, prioritize based on the criteria they have here, the median income of graduates, uh, the sticker price of the school, or the net price, which is the price after you factor in financial aid. Um, how important are athletics? How strong is the academic profile of the average student? Is there a big party scene? Da, 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 da. There are different apps that do this, but this New York Times app I find is very helpful because um, it factors in some things that aren't so common, like economic mobility. So if you're coming from a lower income family or community, and you want to be able to uh, earn at a higher level than the place you came from, your parents or the community that you came from, economic mobility is a strong factor. And while many top tier schools talk about their mission to provide economic mobility, not all of them do this. But this app is a very cool way to find the schools that actually do this, because the New York Times did put a team together to measure that capacity, um, and talk about and research schools from this more economic model. And you would be surprised what shows up when you play with this tool, and it might impact your choices and pad out your list some more. So I highly recommend it. Uh, moving on. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about has to do with choosing a major. And the trend in 2023 was that students applied in huge numbers to the most competitive majors and saw themselves shut out. This happened a lot. And I want to really encourage you to think creatively here, because those very popular competitive majors only have so much room. Even when those schools provide a lot of room for those majors, computer science is the most popular major in the country. Most universities have a humongous computer science department, which includes data science and even some computer engineering and all of that. Um, your chances of getting into these very competitive majors, which I'll just list this off here. Econ, computer science, business, engineering, and pre-med. These five majors are the most competitive. You would do well to really consider your chances at top schools for these majors. Most of the students I work with who get into these important majors have national rankings and awards in their discipline. They have college level research in their discipline. So, for example, a pre-med student that is getting into these top tier schools, these top 50, um, has done some science research or bio research or medical research with mentorship from a college professor. And there are programs that are designed to help students do stuff like this, where you get paired with a college mentor and while you're in high school and all of that. And if you're interested in learning about these programs, I help pair students with researchers if that's something you'd like to do. Um, and beyond that, a very strong wow, which I will talk about. We will look at the wow later on in this webinar. The other thing to consider is if these things aren't on in your application, national awards and rankings, college level research, that really strong wow, uh, and you still want to study these topics at top schools, choose an alternative major that is adjacent. So math as a major is not as competitive as a computer science major or an econ major, but a lot of the classes overlap. A lot of the cutting edge research overlaps between these two. Sociology, same thing. Uh, Econ and sociology have a lot of overlap. You might even add history and things like cultural studies. Um, these have strong overlaps with econ. So anything in the social studies department, right? Um, for business, uh, if you are not interested in the hard business skills that you would get in like a finance track or an accounting track, psychology actually has a lot of overlap with business. Behavioral economics and psychology have a lot of overlap. Anthropology for pre-med students also can feed into med school very easily, as well as public health. Public health, anthropology, these are classic uh, degrees that pre-med or that med students come from. And if you're into pre-law, which is also somewhat popular, not as popular as these other ones I've mentioned, history is also really a good way to go if you can't get into political science. All right, the other is to look at lower tier schools that offer these very competitive majors. So the big state schools can sometimes have very strong departments in these specific majors: computer science, econ, business, engineering, and pre-med. Because these are so high in demand, state schools, big public schools, tend to do a pretty good job at doing these majors, doing these departments. So like Indiana University is an example of that. They have a very strong business school. They have very strong pre-med. Um, there's also some lesser known names that do a pretty good job of these as well that are private schools, like a Wake Forest, for example. They're a very strong pre-med. Anyway, I help students discover some of the options, some of the alternatives if they can't compete in these majors at top schools. So if you have any questions about that, raise your hand and or reach out to me, and my contact information will be, of course, at the end of this. And if you're watching this video later, it's in the description below. So the other thing that schools really, really focus on when they're admitting students is the college level coursework. So the number one metric is your GPA in college level coursework. It's not your overall GPA. So sometimes people think my overall cumulative GPA is the number one factor. It's actually your GPA in your college level coursework that is the number one factor, because the number one thing that they're thinking about is the student college ready? So they look for evidence, and the number one place they find evidence is your grades in your college level courses. So if you still have time to add more APs to your transcript, go for it. If you don't, if your school doesn't do APs, the equivalent at your school, whatever could be college level, considered college level at your school, talk to your guidance counselors, make sure that at least your core competencies are college level, which is history or social science, the sciences, English, foreign language, and math. make sure that you are having college level courses in those core competencies. At least one science, if you can't get all of them, at least one. I like to say that students who are competing at top tier schools need to have 7 to 12 college level courses on their transcript by the time they graduate. So most of my students who break in at that level have 10 or more. So take a look at your transcript. Is there anything missing in the amongst the core competencies? These are the subjects that your school requires you to take to graduate. So those core subjects should all have been college level by the time you graduate. That's what the top schools need to see. And then beyond the core competencies, they look for your chosen concentration, so your major, um, and what is college level in your major or your chosen concentration. There should be courses that are college level for that. So let's say you wanted to go into business in college. There needs to be college level courses in business. So AP Micro Macro is one, Business 101 at a college, community college in your area would be another one. If your high school doesn't offer all of the college level courses you think you need, that if something's missing, take it online. Take it at a community college. Make sure it's on there. This is the number one thing they look at to determine that you're college ready. There's other things they look at too, and we're going to talk about that next. So, who are these admissions officers? How do they think? This is a reader, an admission officer. We'll call him David. That's not his real name, just to protect his identity. Who read for Cornell for a while. This is what he says. One year I had a student with a near perfect SAT score and straight A's. So by the way, that's everybody who is competitive at Cornell. This is nothing special for this student. I'd originally put him in the submitted pile, but when we had to reduce the list, but then we had to reduce the list, excuse me. I reread his essays and frankly, they were just a little more boring than the other kids, so I cut him. Boring was the only justification that I needed, and he was out. So I'm going to unpack this boring for you just a little bit. Doesn't mean that the student um, didn't have a personality or anything unique. What they're saying is the student didn't have a compelling drive. The student didn't have a compelling drive to learn and grow and be a student. That's what they mean. They don't just mean like they would be fun at a party. They mean that the student was compelling in the sense of academics and their love of learning. Let me read you another quote from another reader. I think that sums this up even better. So this is a woman named Helen. She read for Yale and MIT. And she says, some 70% of the kids who apply are qualified to come to school here. And that's true for Yale, that's true for MIT. Like I said, they have straight A's and amazing SATs. And we have space for 1 in 10. We can be as choosy as we like. It almost comes down to whether or not you're a likable person. Admissions officer is really asking herself, would I like to hang out with this guy or gal for the next 4 years? So let me unpack this a little bit. Hang out. They don't mean like hang out at a party. They mean like I could sit down and have a really rich conversation with this person about what they love. I could sit down and ask them a really unique question and they would really intrigue me with their answers. It means like that this is a person who thinks deeply and can articulate their thoughts and isn't just going to school for, you know, getting a skill, getting a competency, and getting a good job. But they're curious. They want to know about the world. They have something to offer. They want to engage. And um, It's because these places are trying to curate a society, if you will, a kind of ideal democracy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a second. So when academics are equal between candidates, character is the determining factor. Character is the determining factor for admission. So again, when academics are equal, the GPA, the test scores, etc., it is the softer side of the application, the essays, the activities on the list, the independent projects that the student's doing outside of school. These are the things that actually determine entry, because these are the things that show that character piece that those two admissions officers were talking about. Show that drive to learn, that love of learning, that insatiable curiosity that thrives on college campuses. And I break these character traits down into a rubric you'll see in just a minute. So before we get there, let's talk about a case study. We're going to talk about this student named Miles. I'll move my face there for a second. This is a student I worked with who came to me with, like they described, very high GPA, very high SAT, did a lot in the world of business. He's very passionate about it, had a lot of extracurriculars, internships, etc., in businesses, and he was really aiming for the very top schools, UC Berkeley Haas, Georgetown McDonough, UPenn Wharton, and similar. But as I was mentioning, to break through at the top, it's very, very hard when you end up looking a lot like the other applicants. And he had a really hard time trying to find a way to distinguish himself and stand out. Because on paper, all the other applicants had the internships and the high SAT and the high GPA. And he had been through other admissions coaches before he got to me who all told him, don't apply to business, apply to something adjacent, and then transfer later. Mostly they suggested Asian studies because he'd had a lot of Asian community advocacy, Chinese, especially Chinese community advocacy in his resume. And this is a horrible idea. If anyone is giving you this advice to change the major just to get in, I know I just said something similar, but it's very important. It's very, very important that that when you do that, you are uh, not choosing a major that is so off the radar of your profile. Asian studies was really not gonna fly for Miles because there was so much extracurricular activity in business. And the university would look at this and they would be like, Asian studies, my eye. I don't think so. They're very aware of that kind of gaming. Um, However, if he had chosen something like data science for business analytics, that would have made more sense, right? So he came to me and I said to him, let's take a look at your story. Let's look at this wow factor that I like to help students find. So before we get to how he solved his problem, I want to talk again about how schools um, uh, or what an admissions office is trying to do. They're trying to create this pool of people in their next freshman class that is sort of like an ideal democracy, an ideal society. They call the student they're looking for the citizen student. They have different names for it. The citizen scholar, the ethical student. Sometimes they just say autonomous learner or the mini expert. It's those students that are already aware of what kind of makes them tick and gets them out of bed at 4 a.m. and are ready to go after it and don't need a whole lot of hand holding. They can jump into a university, grab and search for those resources that can help them deepen their learning, expand their learning, lead in a way help them lead and create opportunities for others to learn and explore and expand and experience. They're drawn to society's big hairy problems. So students that already have a sense of some issue or problem in their community, in the world, that they want to use their degree to help change, to help solve. These students also show a lot of resilience. Sometimes they use the word grit or authenticity. They're they're emotionally intelligent enough to share their vulnerability at times, to share their doubts, and to get help, to seek out community and mentorship. So these qualities all come out again in the softer side of the application, I call it, which is all of the essays, the recommendation letters, um, the resume elements, the activities, and sometimes the interviews that some universities allow students to give. So that's where these qualities get communicated. The way I like to break down this wow is in three parts. And everybody I work with, we look at this diagram and we identify a very clear wow for the student that is like the keystone for the entire application. All content kind of moves through this wow. And it has, like I said, three criteria. One is your academic passion. So there's kind of three passions that overlap. You have an academic passion, which is the intellectual pursuit that you would get out of bed at 4 a.m. to go experience or study or read about or talk about, or open up the internet and do a YouTube rabbit hole for hours looking at. Um, the second is your civic passion, the thing that you out in the world, the problem out in the world in your community that you would want to go and engage and change, uh, possibly through that intellectual or academic passion. And then the third I call heart passion, which isn't necessarily about changing the world or isn't necessarily academic, but it awakens your inspiration. It awakens your love of being alive. And where those three things overlap, that's your wow. Because no one is going to have the same three things overlapping. And your story about that overlap is the wow factor, is the thing that should be uniting all the elements of your application. And like I said, with my clients, we identify this, we articulate this, and we use this to create everything that is shared and in a way, create a brand for your profile. So for Miles, he loved business, as I mentioned. He loved community leadership. That was his heart passion. He did a lot of club leadership, but also like out in his community in the Bay Area, he did a lot of work helping the Chinese community. He volunteered a lot at the um, Asian American Chamber of Commerce, mostly Chinese uh, cultural advocacy. He liked to write articles about issues facing Asian American people. API discrimination was a big issue for him that he wrote a lot about and led clubs about this in his high school. He also had a very strong feeling about how business might help a community. And he had many experiences and internships and so on that showed him the power of business to change a local economy or a local community. And when he was a server at Panda Express, his high school job, I'll move my photo so you can see his face. When he was a server at Panda Express, uh, he told me he thought a lot about how like how could this restaurant impact this community if it weren't a chain restaurant that funneled its resources that it earned back to an a-local or non-local corporation. And and so he started to dream about a restaurant that was very engaged locally and even did data analytics on the um, ingredients that the restaurant used, the type of uh, client the restaurant served, and different community stakeholders that could benefit from that information. And he was also taking a course at Georgetown online for business that was helping him think about these things. And so we decided to help him write an essay that explained this in a way where he took the reader through a day at Panda Express and the different thoughts that he was having about this potential business idea, this restaurant idea, based on what he was learning at Georgetown. And it totally was a slam dunk. He got into every single school he applied to, including Wharton, including Georgetown McDonough, um, U Michigan Ross, you name it. He ended up getting a full scholarship to UC Berkeley Haas, and he's now in his third year there. And so if you want to talk to him, I can hook you up. Wonderful student, did an extraordinary job. So let's keep going. How can you do this? Why don't you take some time right now to dream out loud on paper for a second? So get a pen and answer just a few questions and see if you can identify your wow in the next couple of minutes. So again, the three passions. The first is academic. Get as niche as possible. So if you're like, oh, I am really excited about bio, get more specific. Is it bio for animals? Is it bio for the environment? Is it bio for the human body? Is it a particular kind of bio? Is it the endocrine system, the circulatory system, respiratory? Is it something about the combination of systems, the more holistic idea of bio? See if you can name for yourself in your discipline um, something more specific, more niche that you could like do a YouTube rabbit hole for 2 hours, just nerding out about it. This topic, this kind of passion really matters when it comes to college admissions at the top. So take a moment, write that down. The next, the civic passion. So this again, this is the big hairy problem you want to impact with your degree. Think about a problem out in your community, out in the world that you would love to see change based on what you're learning and what you're passionate about learning. No problem is too big. If it seems like it's way impossible, just little you, that's okay. You know, if it's like you're really passionate about the environment, you're really passionate about climate, and I would love to get all the plastic out of the Pacific Ocean. That's what you would put down. That kind of big problem is great for your application and for your profile. And then the last one, the heart passion. This is an activity. It could be academic, it could be artistic, it could be civic. It doesn't have to necessarily not be academic or civic. But I open up a third space where you could list another activity that fulfills you but isn't necessarily about changing the world, but it's just something that just you're in your heart, you love doing it, you love thinking about it, you love talking about it. Um, it lights you up. And write that one down now as well. And then think about what is the overlap of these three things? What is there an industry, a profession where these three things overlap? If you don't know, Share this list with adults, teachers, ask around, see what you think might be um, the marriage of these three things in the world. Um, then the next thing to do is to look at your transcript and your resume and ask yourself, does my transcript and my resume as it stands right now tell the story of the overlap of these three things? If it doesn't, you would do well to seek out more courses and extracurriculars that do make these things overlap, in which these things do overlap. So, for Miles, it would be working with uh, a business incubator where he could brainstorm and incubate his restaurant idea. That would be the thing that he could do to help increase the evidence of his passion and his wow, the evidence of his wow. So when it comes time to drafting your application, it's really important that, again, the elements of your application, the essays, the letters, the transcript, the activities, reinforce this uh, narrative over and over and over. Um, again, resume boosters, evidence, we were talking about this just now. One thing that a lot of students don't think about and don't have when it comes to top schools is college level evidence of this overlap of three passions, this wow. And we talked about how coursework is the number one. The second thing is some kind of independent um, project outside of school. It could possibly be within your high school, but usually it's not, where you are doing college level work uh, that marries these three things. The most common is uh, professor mentored research. So I have students who are doing science research, medical research with a college professor that they found through an online program. I have students who start nonprofits. I have students who start businesses that are mentored by professors or researchers. I have students that uh, take a course at a university um, in that has these topics overlapping, or join the research of a professor at a university that are looking for interns and helping that professor complete that work, um, which does, again, help these three things overlap. Like I had a student who was really interested in neurology, and she was also really interested in uh, women's health, especially women who were surviving domestic abuse. And she worked in a uh, women's shelter. She volunteered in a women's shelter, among many things that she did. And so she joined some research at a university in her area that looked at the brains of women who had survived domestic abuse. So literally, it was brain scans and studies of the effects of this on the neurology. So she was not only doing the social side, working with these women in her internship, she was also looking at the neurology through this research that this other professor was leading. And now she's doing pre-med at UPenn in neurology. Uh, so shows you the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like I said, I have other students who were doing business who started businesses in high school and had professional mentors, people who were business leaders or college researchers who were mentoring them. These are the things to think about. If you want to get yourself this kind of experience, I highly recommend it, not just for the resume, but for yourself. It really does show you what you might be doing in college when you start to do this independently. It can really clarify for you if this is truly a passion, which is so important, right? And also what's possible out there in the world. So if you're looking for a researcher, reach out to me. I have a lot of researchers I can connect you with in all different kinds of disciplines and all different kinds of universities, possibly one where you might want to be a student later. So reach out to me if you're looking for that. All right, so now just a few tips about the college essay. Um, the uh, number one thing I would say for a great college essay topic is to go for the weirder, the more specific, maybe the nerdier. Like Miles's essay talking about his high school day job working at Panda Express. That's kind of strange. And him talking about like his inner thoughts about how business could impact his customers as they came in if this restaurant were a community impact restaurant. Um, Based on his Georgetown experience. Like, that's a little bit, kind of nerdy, right? These choices, what leans more into the weird, the nerdy, the strange, these linger. These stand out. The reader doesn't forget those. So with all my clients, we scratch around for that, and I have an exercise I'm going to show you to find those kinds of topics. There are a few topics I would say generally don't work super well. Stories about the death of a grandparent, the divorce, uh, and mental health stories. These have a huge impact on us. I'm not saying these aren't impactful events in a person's life. They are. However, they are universal forms of suffering. The death of somebody in the family, mental health, a divorce. These are so common that it's hard for a student to write about it in a way that stands out, unfortunately. Other things that are like this, the big game, whether it's a sports event or a chess event or, a robotics competition or something like this, a big science competition, that these tend to not make the best essays, although it does depend on your angle. Um, they're very common, and that's why I tend to dissuade them. But if you can find a spin on it, maybe it could work. But in general, if you have to find a spin to make it work, I would say the topic might not be right. Service trips and vacations in general, not so great because they tend to be curated by adults, created by adults, uh, and then the young person is invited in. And these kinds of stories just don't go over well. They really want to look for the independence of the student, the autonomy of the student. What did the student go out and seek on their own? What kind of challenge did they go and create for themselves? Not one that was created by a church or a high school or an abroad program or one's parents, right? You need discernment and advice for a strong college essay. Working on your own in general will not create the kind of essay that stands out in the admissions process, at least stands out in the right way. Excuse me, coughing. So get the help of teachers, English teachers, guidance counselors, or someone like me. That's really, really key, both for the creation and also for the polishing. So good essays go through many drafts, and getting outside experienced eyes on what you're writing, really, really key for the main statements. I actually don't recommend using the prompts from the Common App. Most of my students and I start writing an essay based on another exercise that I have, which I'll show you in a second. And then we choose a prompt at the end that fits that essay. And that always works. Those prompts, there's 8 of them. There's even one that says choose your own prompt or make up your own prompt. That's just as valid. Um, and the reason I do that is because I find the prompts tend to make the box too small. They make the mind contain the subject in a way that's too limiting, and the point of view of the student isn't as researched and explored when the prompt is taken too literally. So I tend to not even use them until the very, very end. There's also a few structures that I find are really great for essays. I'm not going to go into that today because I have a whole other webinar where I unpack the actual writing process and the different structures that you can see online. I'll be giving one live soon that you can look at to get more of these details. But very, very briefly, the what I call the origin story, the story of you discovering this wow, where these passions overlap, that can make a great topic for an essay because no one else is going to have that, right? Um, Great for students that really know what they're going to do in college. The next I have down here is called a patchwork essay. This is more intellectual. It's a little more challenging to write. So it's for students that have more of an intellectual mind that might be going into a more interdisciplinary major or mix of majors, a major and a minor. That's a great structure for those kinds of students. Essentially, it's a structure where you um, tell a story um, a little bit more like Miles did, where you're in like one location or one moment, and the mind travels out of that location or moment to think about things and bring in questions and anecdotes from other parts of your life that would fill in the theme and say more about the theme, the way Miles did in his essay. That his essay was a patchwork essay. And then at the end, the reader has been taken through kind of a kaleidoscope of variations on a theme, which would be your wow, right? We can talk about this forever, but you know, there's another webinar for this. So go check it out. I like to say that the approach to the application, the wow approach, can be broken down into these three elements. The first W, the want, is about what you would, again, what would you get up at 4 a.m. to learn or do? It could be academic, it could not be, it could be civic, it could be that heart passion, as long as it's authentic to you. And then again, uh, you could pick one of these things and tell an original story about it across your application. Pursuing that. So like, again, the discovery of the passion, the wow, or even a really cool story of just pursuing it. And later down in the timeline after discovering it, just pursuing it, that would help your original voice come out. So one thing that they really look for in that essay is that point of view or voice. And when you talk about your wow factor, your passions, your voice comes out. And the last is wisdom. This is where I like to say students share their deeper reflections uh, they have gained by pursuing what they love, and they weave that into their essays and their application. Again, uh, there's a lot more to say about this, but you can look at the webinars that I put together that explain all of this. I have a great exercise I use to help students start, um, where you go through a list of top tens, like list top 10 things you love, big and small, top 10 passions. There's also 10 rituals you do, 10 routines and rituals, 10 challenges in your life that really changed you or impacted you, and 10 places and things that matter to you. These tend to be great sources for essay topics. And you can find this on my website as well. In the end, I like to say that college admissions and college application process can feel like that show The Bachelor, or in this case, The Bachelorette, where it feels like the university is the one person who gets to choose amongst a million suitors, and one person gets the Rose and the other, 30 folks in this picture, for example, don't get one. And when we're doing our job right, we actually flip this around and we turn the colleges into the suitors and you into the bachelor or bachelorette who gets to hand out your application and say, you're lucky to get my interest. That kind of confidence in ourselves really comes from doing this important look at where do our passions overlap? Where can we really boost our resume and our transcript so that it has evidence of our passion, show that we're college ready. And I also like to say now is the best time to get started. This summer is the best time to write your essays. And I'm going to be giving some webinars on the essay this summer so you can use those as well to get going. If you haven't started your list, get going now. I also help people do that as well. And about that, so my services, just very briefly. So, of course, I have the essay starter, which you saw. I offer anybody a free consultation with a student and parent together. If that's interesting to you, just reach out to me, hop into my schedule, let's talk. Um, I, of course, do a lot of one-on-one application coaching and resume building and list building. I do a wraparound college admissions service at my company, Wow College Consulting. I also don't take on a lot of students. I take on a maximum 20 a year, so everyone gets as much attention as possible, gets full attention essentially through the entire process A to Z. Um, so if that you're interested in that, reach out to me. We can talk. I also do uh, simple essay review or essay coaching. And if you're interested in a package with me, I'm running a promotion. You can get 10% off until May 31st if you're seeing this now or you're watching the recording before the end of the month. So thank you all so much. It looks like we are at time. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and email me at justin@wowcollegeconsulting.com. I'm sorry I couldn't get to you because we are running out of time. Or you can text or call me at the number you see on the screen. I'll also put this information in the video recording in the comment, in the description, I mean, below. So thank you all for your time. It's been totally beautiful to get to share this important information with you. And again, do reach out to me with any questions or inquiries, or if you're interested in talking about working together, I do have a little room. I'd be happy to meet you and see if we're a fit. All right, everybody, take good care of yourselves and talk soon.